This is Jordan Poyer, safety for the Buffalo Bills, and you are now listening to Cover One Buffalo Podcast. Let's go.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo Podcast. You are joining your partners in crime, Greg Thompson, Aaron Quinn. Mr. Quinn, how are we doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I had to clean off all the clothes and crap that I have all over that exercise bike to make it actually look like I use it. In the background, it doesn't just sit there as a coat rack, but it's there. No, but I'm doing great, man. Bills are a winning team. I just had a delicious steak, and I'm ready to talk to you.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting that, we're excited tonight. We're going to talk about, a team with a defensive-minded coach coming in, trying to build a culture with a young quarterback and a two-headed running attack with one receiver that gets most of their catches and a rookie tight end and a strong defense. And I just described both teams exactly.
Yeah.
It's crazy as we were doing the research for this, how similar these teams are for having one be 3-7 and one be 7-3 is pretty crazy.
Yeah, well, Alan talked about in his press conference today that their record is not indicative of how they've played this year. They've had a lot of close games. They've had a lot of one-score games, and the Bills have had a lot of those and could have easily gone the other way, and they could be looking at a 3-4-win team here in Buffalo. So it's not always you can just look at the record, check the box scores, and say, oh, well, we should beat this team. Same thing just happened in Cleveland a couple weeks ago for the Bills. I think a lot of people just looked at that box score, didn't really see how tough that schedule was and how close they were actually in some of those games, barring some big mistakes. Sometimes the record, it's a cliche that the team's better than the record indicates. And I think that the Bills have run up against that a few times, and I think there's probably more down the line like we talked about on Twitter today. So the Bills are a mediocre football team, and they're playing against another mediocre football team. When you're two mediocre teams, there's not going to be a huge difference, but the records could be.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of those tough losses you're talking about, they lost to the Bears by 2. They lost to the Jags by 2. They lost to the Colts by 2. Last week, they had a 20-0 lead at halftime against the Vikings and somehow lost by 4, 27-23. They have had heartbreaking loss after heartbreaking loss. I think besides the, one game, the Chiefs took them to the woodshed pretty good, 30-6. Other than that,
that's going to happen against the Chiefs though, man.
Oh yeah. They've been in every game. And they, they beat the Titans worse than they beat the Titans. They beat the Chargers, who are a very talented team. They beat the Browns, who we just lost to. Yeah. So, it's certainly something that I think we need to take them more seriously than their 3-7 record would indicate.
Absolutely. And when you look ahead, I know there's a lot of people looking ahead on Twitter. I don't love to do it. I do it just because I'm a fan. I just can't help myself, even though I hate the whole notion of it. But you do start to look ahead. And when you do, this is one of the games you really have to come away with. There's some others there that you might be able to steal, but you have to, I think, prove yourself against another team that is playing good defense, is just good enough on offense to, if you're not playing well on offense, to run away with the game. Putting up 20 points and a half, going up 20-0 shows that you can score. They've struggled this year, but a lot of their struggles, if you just go and look at DVOA, if you just go and look at their team rankings, a lot of that time was with Joe Flacco. The offense has changed entirely when I sat back and watched him. I watched one game with Flacco just to see if I could gauge what the difference was. And it's pretty substantial just in the plays that they're running, the style of offense they're using. And it's not a huge improvement better, but it is much better. They're scoring more points right now with Allen at quarterback.
Yeah, we'll jump into it. And again, thanks for the guys in the chat here. Make sure you come on over, check us out at cover1.net, breaking down everything you guys have going, enjoying everything that we have going on here. Give us a rating or review wherever you're listening to us. As we kind of get into the Broncos against the Bills, we're 10 games into the season, makes it easy to look at a lot of the kind of things that are on pace here. I wasn't exaggerating about the similarities to the team, kind of a two-headed running attack, I think, is where my concerns start with Phillip Lindsay and, Freeman, and being able to look at how they approach what they do. There's a ton of similarities to style, wiggling versus the interior, where Phillip Lindsay is not that dissimilar from Devin Singletary and Royce Freeman like they're Frank Gore. It's a really similar approach in my mind.
Well, let's talk about similarities. And I know I just said you can't always just look through DVOA or any of those things, but let's look at them for a second, because I do think the records, like we said, show a bigger gap than maybe there is. When I look at their offensive DVOA, The Bills rank 23rd, Denver ranks 22nd. The passing offense, Buffalo ranks 24th, Denver ranks 25th. Rushing offense, Buffalo ranks 11th, they rank 10th. So they're right there side by side in every offensive category in DVOA through 11 weeks in the NFL season. To me, that is probably as close as it gets this year as far as two teams and what they're producing here throughout the year. So I think you're hitting it right on the head that these teams are a lot closer than fans think. And even you look at the points for 21-17, points against 17-19. These teams are extremely close. This is going to be a close game. But yeah, the similarities are showing up not only in their personnel, but also they're showing up in the stats.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly a reason that I think you see the point spread the way that it is. This is a game where they're a 4-point favorite, which means that on a neutral field, they think the Bills are a 1-point better team. That's not normally what you see here in a 7-3 versus 3-7 team. Same questions that came up about the Browns game and being able to, kind of review where things line up on those kind of talent on paper. And I think it's fair. I think that the Bills should be favored. I think they are a slightly better team. They're just not 7-3 versus 3-7 better. And I think all the stats you laid out show exactly why. It's just not that simple to be able to look at it that way. And I am curious, how are things going to play out in having a game now this is only going to be Brandon Allen's third game as a pro. He had the bye week there to kind of get his bearings a little bit. In just about every phase of the game against the Vikings last week, he started out well, just like the rest of the team started out well. And then they certainly went downhill, and he certainly had a rough second half. So I think it's very similar to some other games. Which team are we going to see? Are we going to see the team that jumped out on the Vikings the way that they did? Because I don't know that the Bills have a 20-point comeback in them against this defense. Whereas if we can get a little bit of a lead, be able to lean on them. They have a very fast defense that gets penetration. Von Miller's probably the quickest edge rusher in the NFL still. Being able to look at it that way, if we're behind and they're able to pin their ears back, that plays exactly into their style, what Vic Fangio wants to do, running the ball, being able to pin their ears back on defense. If we flip that and they're having to come back, we're able to pin our ears back against Brandon Allen. We're able to lean on their fast defensive line and outside linebackers with our huge offensive line and able to run the ball at them. I think that really leads us. So I actually think the game could be decided fairly quickly on which team jumps out early, if either, because I don't think either of us expect a very high scoring game.
Yeah, and I don't know that either, like you said, either team really jumps out early. I see a lot of field goals in this game, just getting into scoring position. I think both teams are going to struggle to move the ball with consistency. As far as the Bills go, though, and approaching this team, I know a lot's been made this week of the blitzing that the Bills did last week against Miami. I know a lot's been made this week of the up-tempo pace that Dable had against Miami. And I believe Sean McDermott and Brian Dable when they said, well, that's a week-to-week specific thing. I know a lot of people said that's how they're going to play in the future. I don't know if it's going to be how they play every matchup, but I think it plays pretty well into this matchup again as well. I'd like to see some of the blitzing to keep Allen confused, some of the looks. This team's really good because of our safeties at being able to disguise some looks. Because of our fast safeties and middle linebackers. So I'd like for them to try to use that stuff, confuse him, get some blitzing in on him. And then the same thing. I think you would send me the article where they were saying that same thing of keeping them, keeping up pace against that defense is a good path to success. So I think the same type of game plan we saw last week is a similar game plan to what we're going to see this week. I just don't know that it has the success and the big playability, and you might just be working to get in field goal range this week instead.
Yeah, and there's a couple things. It actually didn't go into it in that article, but one of the things I looked at as I was kind of prepping for this, so for as many similarities that there are, and they're very real, that those are legitimate similarities, one of the big differences is that although they're both defensive-minded coaches, Vic Fangio plays his core players far more snaps than the Bills do. The Bills rotate way more. The Bills have almost everyone on the defensive side of the ball who dresses gets meaningful snaps. There's a handful of guys that are in core special teams roles, but everything else, they play 5 and, all 5 safeties, all 5 cornerbacks, they play all 8 linemen. Linebackers, the one area where Milano and Edmonds pretty much play every snap. And even then we see some rotation between Zoe and Corey Thompson on occasion. The Bills play a lot of guys rotating a ton. The Broncos play their core guys a significantly higher amount. They had 6 guys on defense play 100% of the snaps, and then multiple others like Von Miller was 89%, and Derek Wolfe as a defensive lineman over 80%, just playing a ton of snaps percentage-wise, and that teams have found if you get them caught in that and start running up-tempo, no huddle, you can really wear on them. And you saw the Vikings do it in the second half. So I'm curious to see, did the Bills take a, kind of a page out of that playbook, and we might see a little bit of the same, trying to lean on them early and then maybe go up-tempo late.
Yeah, I think you're gonna see that against a team like that, like you mentioned. If they're gonna be on the field a lot, the way to wear them out and kind of neutralize some of the special players that they have is that way. I guess my biggest fear coming into this is if you do go up tempo, that's great when it works, right? That's what we saw last week. It's fantastic when it works. It's a really hard thing though to maintain each and every week. Especially I think in a week like this, because I think one of the reasons it worked great is John Brown had a great, fantastic afternoon. And I'm not sure that he can replicate that kind of success against this defense. I think Fangio's looking at the Buffalo Bills and saying, all right, we're going to try to neutralize Allen, keep him in the pocket. We'll maybe let Devin Singletary get a couple of his. I think they probably think that they can keep him pretty contained. They're going to focus on John Brown. He is clear that when you watch the Bills, if you watch them with an objective eye, he is by far and away their best weapon on offense. He moves chains. He's the big play guy. If they can neutralize him, man, I don't know how you can run a fast-paced offense and keep that defense on the field, because I just don't see anybody else that can convert on a 3rd and long, that can make a big play to keep a drive going. I just don't see the talent right now on our team.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a difference. I don't know that we're on the same level as a team that's running out there, Kirk Cousins, Delvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, right, Kyle Rudolph, and Irv Smith. I don't know that we're quite at that caliber and that rhythm, like the amount of time they've been together here doing what they're doing. This is their 3rd season together, the majority of them. So being able to look at that's tough. And where you touched on with John Brown, that's actually going to be the biggest test this week, is who else can step up, because Chris Harris is legitimately a lockdown corner. He is a Stephon Gilmore caliber cornerback in this league, Trey White, that kind of guy that and he's the build and quickness that I don't know that he can shut down John Brown and he's going to have nothing. But as an example, Stephon Diggs is pretty darn good. Stephon Diggs is arguably the best route runner in the NFL. He had no catches in the first half because Chris Harris was locked on him. The idea, they moved him around and schemed him open in the second half. And any time that they found him on Devontae Harris, who is their other guy, and then Duke Dawson, the name you may recognize, he was a mid-round pick that a lot of people liked coming out of Florida, got traded from the Patriots and is now the nickelback for the Broncos. They picked on Devontae Harris and Duke Dawson significantly. They did not go after Chris Harris. I hope that's the case. I hope that we are not going after Chris Harris either. But if we can scheme John Brown on Devontae Harris, I think you have to go after him every time. And when he's not, I think that Cole Beasley's quickness on Duke Dawson in the slot is another significant one. So I think we might see one of the better Cole Beasley games that we've seen so far.
We're going to have to. And every time I'm asked, who's going to step up, the only person that really I think has the ability, at least that has shown the ability to me, is Cole Beasley. So I'm hoping that he's able to step up into that role, because one of the most frustrating things about this offense right now to me is you've seen some flash plays from Dawson Knox. He's not a reliable enough target for me yet to be the guy that is that second or third wide receiving option. So I know a lot of people want him to be. He's just not there yet, in my opinion. And then outside of that, though, it's nobody. We haven't seen a peep from Duke Williams since Tennessee. We've seen one catch from Robert Foster this entire season. He's playing great as a gunner on special teams, so I think he'll continue to be the active guy. I don't think Duke Williams is going to be able to break that spot if he continues to play the way he does on special teams. You see the 1 or 2 plays from Isaiah McKenzie, maybe a game. We're not seeing anything from Roberts except for in the special teams game. I'm getting pretty frustrated, man. You might have to talk me off the ledge on this. It's pretty frustrating that nobody's stepping up outside of Brown and Beasley. And I think this could be the week that really hurts them, that nobody has stepped up into that role, because I do think they're going to be able to at least quiet Brown, put a muzzle on him, maybe limit him to 3-4 catches type of a game. And then Beasley, he's been good. He's been putting up good numbers, like you pointed out to me the other week, but he's not the kind of guy that's a chain mover consistently yet this year. I think he has that ability. We just haven't seen him be the guy that they rely on a 3rd and long to keep the chains moving.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and let's assume that the Broncos are smart and that they do line up Chris Harris on John Brown every opportunity they can, which I think they will.
Yeah.
This is the week to try to take that deep shot to Robert Foster. That Devontae Harris can't keep up with him. He's not going to be able to do that, and to be able to be in that position where you can potentially take your deep shot and hope that you finally hit on one, I think is an interesting approach. And then obviously, I think that another thing that leans into it when you're talking about a team like this, both Derek Wolfe and Von Miller, you have really strong pass rush potential. Being in that position, thank God they don't have Bradley Chubb right now, who was injured earlier this year, and I think in the future is going to be a really dynamic combo with Von Miller. That I think we're going to run a lot of 2 tight end. I think we see a lot of Croft and Knox on the field to get that extra chip on Von Miller, to make him take an even wider set to get outside of that. So I think that, one, we're going to see that to run right at him. I think that's one of the ways that you get Von Miller tired. So he can't be fully at his top speed late in the game, is because you ran right at him a lot early in the game. And that's one area that I will bet on Cody Ford. Cody Ford run blocking Von Miller, I actually will take that. And think that he has the advantage, because I think Von Miller is so quick, but you're talking about probably a 70-pound advantage from that standpoint. I think when we use those 2 tight end sets, that also leans into potential play action, where then maybe we can get Knox down the seam, Croft down the seam. Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons, their 2 safeties, have played pretty well so far. I know the guys there, and Fangio is a very big fan of Justin Simmons. He doesn't get a lot of press around the league, but has been playing very, very well. I think that's going to be a key matchup as well. Are we able to use the 2 tight end sets to keep them off balance, not knowing if we're running, not knowing if we're passing, being able to use play action and maybe take a shot there where they're not expecting it after we hit them with a couple tough runs out of that set? That's an area that I'd like to see them take advantage of, both to support Cody Ford and to get both tight ends in the mix.
Yeah, I think from a running standpoint, I think that's still the strength of this Bills offense. And whether or not it plays out every single week, I think just the threat of the ability to run the ball is enough for them to open up some things. That's why we like seeing Josh Allen in that 25 to 30% play action, playing off the play action pass. This might be a tough week to run the football. They're 6th in rush defense DVOA. They're like 10th or 11th in rush yards per game given up. I don't know that this is going to be a big week to run the football. And in a game like this, where it's so closely contested against a team like this, you want to wear that defense down. I would like for the rush game to get going. So this is going to be a big test of a strength of theirs versus what I think is the strength of the Bills going head to head. And that's going to be, I think, the heavyweight matchup really of this, outside of the Chris Harris, John Brown, who's going to oust each other there. I think the big heavyweight matchup to me in this game is our rushing attack versus their rush defense.
Yeah, and it's a lot of names that fans may not know. You guys hear me talk about Derek Wolfe, but Mike Purcell is a really tough nose tackle, a big guy. A name you guys might recognize from your draft prep, Draymond Jones out of Ohio State, another defensive tackle. They use him as kind of a mix of a 3-4 defensive end. Justin Hollins was another guy who gets in the mix and kind of rotates in. But they have some strong guys in the way that they approach it. Their 3-4 defense is now a little more rare in the NFL. And when they pivot to their nickel, they don't do as much 4-2 nickel. They do a lot of 3-3 nickel, which is a little bit different. So I'm curious to see how that works out. They do that from, obviously you're still calling a linebacker, someone like Von Miller or Malik Reed, who's coming off the other end for them. It's going to be interesting how they mix that in. And then are we able to punch them in the mouth enough to keep them out of that, maybe get them mixed up in that where we can keep them off balance if they get Duke Dawson on the field and we're running at them, or maybe the opposite. They think we're going to run and then all of a sudden we can throw and they might have the linebacker on there and we get Dawson Knox, one-on-one with the linebacker. I think they're going to have to look for something like that to get a play, because otherwise this is a very sound defense with very similar results to what we've shown all season.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's going to be an interesting thing to watch. And I think Dable bought himself a week here, but he really did. The fan base has backed off of him a little bit this week. There is still, you did it against the Dolphins. I think this is going to be a really interesting matchup for the offense, for Josh Allen, for Brian Dable, against a really good defense who's well schemed, maybe one of the better defensive-minded coaches in the league for the last 10, 15 years here in Vic Fangio. He's built some fantastic defenses. Look what the Bears did last year. Look where they're at kind of without them. They're still a good defense, but they're not a Vic Fangio defense. So it'll be interesting to see kind of that scheme versus scheme and how that works, what Allen's able to do against a really good defense. I think this will be a good week for Buffalo fans. If they're able to put up some points against this defense, say they get over 20 points in this matchup and they're able to push the ball down the field a few times, I think that that's a really good exhibit A for Bills fans to get on Twitter and say, hey, this guy's making progress. This guy's really showing something. Dable's a fine offensive coordinator in the NFL. All those things start to kind of come to rest. So this is a big day for the Buffalo Bills offense to put it out there that they can hang with teams. I think at least for a fan like me, if you can come up and put up 20 points on this team, I feel pretty good about all the remaining games on the schedule. If you can put up 20 against this defense and put them away in this game.
Yeah, I think besides the Patriots, this is the next best defense we're going to play all season. I think they're a little bit better than the Ravens defense. I think
Ravens is still good. Yeah,
they're bad, but right there in that same caliber. It's just obviously they've struggled a little bit on offense. So I think that's the kind of game that we're looking at here, is to see a relatively low scoring game in what we expect. But why don't we kind of jump into that a little bit, into what we're kind of predicting here from a game standpoint. Sure. Is that I know both of us are leaning probably on the under. The over-under right now is 38. It's actually one of the lowest it is the lowest this week. It's one of the 5 lowest in the NFL so far this season. They have the Bills favored by 4, so they're very literally predicting 21-17 Buffalo, a very clean, a normal football score. And I think both of us are actually predicting even a little bit lower than that. What do you think we're going to see this week?
Yeah, so I think this is going to be one of those games that is very frustrating, very early. There's not, you get some field goals early, maybe go into the half, up a field goal or something like that, 3 field goals total. And then you start to see a little bit more scoring as it opens up. Teams getting a little desperate to get this win in the second half. But I think it goes into the half low scoring and people are going to blink and say, holy crap, it's halftime already at this, bad football game to watch. I think it's going to be that kind of Sunday. I think the Bills do sneak out. I had it at 19-17. I've had this one as a win since the season started. I think some things have gone their way in the fact that Joe Flacco got hurt. As oddly as that sounds, I think that was helpful to their offense. He's just not there anymore. His head wasn't in the game there. But they still have a rookie quarterback. They still have a bunch of problems on the offensive side of the ball. Similar to the Bills. Bills are flawed too, but I think they don't have as much overall talent on the offensive side of the ball. And then you add in the youth and experience of a 3 games into his career quarterback. So I think that's really where the edge for the Bills is, in a very slim edge.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And it's funny when you talk about the fan bases and the differences and things. We were joking pre-show that, teams and fan bases aren't real big believers in what Buffalo's doing. There's a lot of assumption that we're kind of paper tigers and out there. And as I was kind of preparing for the show, I was reading through kind of their version of Buffalo Rumblings called the Mile High Report, their SB Nation site. And as they're doing their preview, one of their main takeaways was to expose Josh Allen. When it comes down to it, it's really quite that simple. The Bills quarterback has a bit of an inflated perception around the league because he's a halfway decent fantasy option and Buffalo is winning. But if the Broncos can force him to beat them from the pocket, they're in great shape. by most metrics, he's among the dregs of the NFL. So it just kind of shows you the way that we perceive some things and what's seen from the outside versus where other teams that, their fans are coming in expecting them to be able to pull out a win here. And it's funny, you see some of the very same things. If they can finally put forth a complete game, if they can finally put together 4 quarters. So I always kind of go nuts on people that when they say that about the Bills, like, yeah, I think there's been like 4 or 5 complete games throughout the entire league all season. Like, it just doesn't happen. It's a hard league.
The Patriots are the only team that does that.
Yeah, they've only got a couple. They've got a couple ugly ones too.
Right.
But anyways, it just kind of shows you perception wise. I do think that the Bills are going to win this game. I do think that both defenses. I think that your point was spot on. I think that's hysterical that about the first half flying by and all the probably running snaps that we're going to see with the clock continuing to move. It may not be the most exciting thing. I actually think both teams get 3 field goals. I think the Bills get the only touchdown in the game. I'm going to call 16-9 Buffalo, and I think that the Bills do cover their 4-point spread, but that touchdown might come late. I think we might see one of those 3-3, 6-3, 9-6, 9-9 back and forth games that are really close, and then maybe that game-winning touchdown late in the game to be able to do that. So I'm curious to see how things shake out. I think points are going to be tough to come by. Looking at the weather report, you're talking about a high of 40, which we may not reach that high until partway through the game. It does not look like there's going to be a great deal of snow. So it's a very low
wave up here in Buffalo. Like, man, we're hovering around 38 degrees. And snow's nobody knows what's going on.
Yeah. So I think that it should be decent. It doesn't look like high wind. I think that they're predicting 10. Should be good, solid fall football weather. Should be pretty clean from that standpoint. So I'm looking forward to that. So you see our predictions. Both of us kind of going under. Both of us having the Bills winning a close game. Let's take a look. I made a little bit of a comeback in our wagering last week and close the gap a little bit to be able to make it a little more competitive. What do we have on the docket for our bets this week?
Well, I think run the table this weekend, you'll take the lead by 1, right? You're down by 11, I think.
Yeah, it's a 10 or 11. Yeah, right there.
Yeah, we got 4 3-point bets this weekend. Anyone that was probably on here in the chat, in the premium chat here beforehand, got to hear us kind of talk out our bets, which I don't know if that's fun for you guys or not. That might be painful to listen to, but we put I put it to Greg, the score at 18.5. Denver's been averaging 17.2. We put it at 18.5. Greg wanted to take the under. We kind of knew our predictions going into this, so we knew that Greg was going to be under anyway, and I was hovering around that 17 mark also. So Greg's got that one for 3 points. Mm-hmm. And then we had Broncos rushing. There were 6 bets. They're one of the better rushing teams in the league. They're averaging 113, I think we determined. So we put the bet at 115.5. You're taking the under there that the Bills do not give up over 115, even though they're the 27th rated defense and they played Kalen Ballage last week. So sure, yeah, you can have that one right there. You know what? This is embarrassing because I just wrote down Broncos 13.5. I forget which we had on this bet.
So that was the over-under for them as well, since I'm predicting 9 and you had them at 17. Right. We've got the Broncos, their team only over-under. I have under 13.5.
Gotcha. Yeah, so Greg's there. And then Von Miller to get a sack. Greg took the under at 0.5. He thinks that Cody Ford's going to have a career day, and the Bills are going to be able to scheme their way out of Von Miller touching Josh Allen.
Well, one more that I'm going to throw at you live that Nick Lowe put into the chat, I think is an interesting one. In who is going to end up being in this defensive struggle, who's going to have more receiving yards out of the rookie tight ends. I will actually take Noah Fant having more receiving yards than Dawson Knox, that Fant would have more receiving yards for 1 point.
For 1 point?
For 1 point.
All right. Keith's got nailed it on the head here in the chat that I just basically feel bad for you and want you to get back into this. I'll give you the 1 point. I agree. I think Fant is going to have more than Dawson Knox, but I'll give you the point.
All right. That's fair. Although part of your lead was built up with winning bets like over 0.5 points for the Dolphins. So you cherry picked your own way, a couple of those as well.
Yeah, I don't agree with any of that. I'll have to check the tape.
That's not so. Yeah, I can't comment on that at this time. I'm going to check the tape.
One point, though, I do want to talk about here before we wrap it up for the evening is I think that it was an interesting conversation of reading that article about how people feel about Josh Allen and the Bills. And I think that as fans, a lot of the times we get caught up in this of underestimating teams just by going on NFL.com and looking at the rankings or looking at their standings and things like that. Instead of, I know people get probably frustrated with me online, instead of watching the film, watching the context of how are they losing? Yeah, they're a 4-win team or a 5-win team, but how did they get there? What is the context of that? Because we want to defend Josh Allen like crazy, right? We see people online saying he's not that good. Look at the stats, look at the DVOA, but then we're going in there and saying, oh yeah, but you're not getting the context. You don't know this, that, and the other thing. And we got to try to keep that in mind objectively about other teams and how not only do they view us, but how we view them, and maybe curbing our expectations to say, hey, we're going to be able to go in there and beat up on this team because they have 3 wins. We've seen it happen with the Browns. And so that covered that topic, I think, is just a good perspective to fans sometimes to come out and say, all right, well, before I rush to judgment, just say this team's bad. Let me look at it. Because honestly, it's the NFL. Outside of maybe 3-4 of these teams that are probably just bad teams, there isn't a lot of bad teams or bad players in the NFL. There's a lot of mediocre, and then there's a little bit above that, and that's kind of how it rises throughout the year. So just keep that stuff in mind, I think that was a great point you brought up.
Yeah, I mean, we went at it a little bit today, and I think it's funny because it comes off as though we're downplaying the team, because the argument that we got into online was about whether you should count the Steelers as just some automatic win, and that we're not saying that they can't win. We're not saying that we don't even maybe want them to win or hope that they win or think that it's more likely that they win than not. It's that when some people come out and are talking about, oh, I just expect that to be a W, be like, well, I mean,
or this team's bad.
Yeah. Or that this is just a terrible team. They're garbage. They're trash. Things like that. It just goes over the top, in that the Broncos, the Steelers, and honestly, maybe even the Jets are in that same ballpark of good enough when they have a good day to beat good football teams. And the teams I just rattled off have wins against the Cowboys, have wins against the Ravens, have wins against the Chargers and the Rams and the Colts, and good football teams that when they showed up that day, those fan bases had chalked that up as a win as well. So, the Broncos are one of those games. I'm glad that it's in Buffalo, because I think they are one of the teams where there is a definitive difference playing at Mile High Stadium versus playing them on the road. Yeah. Really happy about that. But this is not in the bag. This is a tough game against a good, talented team. And then we have several other of those coming the rest of the year as well. So being able to be in that spot, that's more of what we were talking about, is just that you can't count ahead. We can't assume anything. And unfortunately, this Bills team isn't that talented that we can count anything in the bag, short of maybe Cincinnati and Miami. But beyond that,
even that first Miami game, we got there, I saw tweets out there, they'd never been more confident going into a game as the fan base, and then that confidence got shaken real quick. If it wasn't for Trey White, we're looking at a whole different season here going forward. I just don't understand where Bills fans can get the hubris to, after decades of being totally mediocre NFL football team. I don't even think that the team this year is that much better than they've been for 15 years consistently. But when you look back at every season, I remember every single season looking back and watching games and saying, oh my God, they're 3 plays away of this game. They're 2 kicks away on this game. Their record could be 9-win team. This could be a 10-win team. And a lot of these teams are at that point. So I just don't understand the hubris of Bills fans to come out and say that 1, any win's a guarantee, or that 2, teams are just trash because of their record, and not taking into any of the context of why they're getting there. Because we've been that team for 15 years of, oh man, if just a few things went our way, oh, if they could just play 2 or 3 complete games. That has been the story of the Buffalo Bills throughout their drought, and still continuing on after the drought.
Yeah, it's tough. And I do think that we're building something here. I do think that some of the depth of the roster is showing its value here. I think some of the areas that we've seen before, some of the injuries that we've seen recently here would have been crippling injuries in the past. And now we have a backup plan and it's thinner than we'd like, but we're still in good position. I think some of those close games are where some of those things like culture matter. I think that some of those things are coming into fruition, but we're still building. This is still going the right direction. It's not at a destination. We haven't achieved anything. We haven't built some juggernaut that we can count every week. We're in a position now where we're 7-3. 7-3 is awesome. We need to go 3-3. We need to go 500 down the stretch here to be able to confirm a playoff spot. I think there's a path if we go 2-4 where it's still feasible at 9-7. But 10-6, we are 100% in the playoffs. If we get 10-6, we are making the playoffs. Yeah. In that 10-6, I talked on a couple other shows that we're friends with here, in that, I don't think it's going to be as clean as we beat the Broncos, beat the Steelers, beat the Jets, lose to the Cowboys, lose to the Ravens, lose to the Patriots. I actually think there's going to be a surprise there on both sides. I think that we probably drop one of the games that we're expecting out of the Broncos, the Steelers, and the Jets. And I think we actually get one of the sneaky ones that we're chalking up as losses amongst the Cowboys, the Ravens, and the Patriots, because I think we can hang with any of those teams. And I think that we probably will have a Browns-type letdown in one of those other games where the other team kind of shows up ready to roll. And that I'm curious to see how things shake out, but that I think that we're in that position. I think that we're ready to go as far as the rest of the season goes, to be in a position to do this. And that's awesome. That's not a position that, as Bills fans, we've been in a long, long time, literally in 20 years. 7-3 is the best team that the best record we've had in 20 years. And being in that kind of position where we can be reasonable down the path, down the stretch, going 500, not needing some crazy pinball, the crazy red yarn conspiracy theory board of all the things we need to happen, like the crazy Tyler Boyd 40-yard touchdown that got us in 2 years ago. Being in that kind of position, having that kind of opportunity is something that's refreshing. And I hope Bills fans enjoy it week to week. I hope we don't look too far ahead. I hope we don't let our expectations go crazy. And I hope that we just enjoy each of these games, because we finally are going to have a fun 6-game stretch to end the season.
Yeah, and I totally agree, actually, with everything you're saying. When you go through the schedule and you pick your wins, I try to pick those as what I think they should win. I agree, though, coming up in the stretch, I think there's going to be something that happens that we don't think should happen, and something that happens that, surprises everybody on both sides. This could be a very telling week, and this would be a tough week, I think, to drop. I think if you're going to drop a game, I'm probably rather drop the Steelers, even though they have more of a chance to make the playoffs. I don't know that this game at 7-3, I want to be 8-3. I don't want to go into the next game. I want to go into Thanksgiving at 8-3 and have a shot to surprise the Cowboys and get up to that. We're one game away from 10 wins. I want to establish that early, because you can stack wins and that can become a thing, but you start taking L's, that can become a thing. And I can see that getting away from this team really quick. If they drop this game, they go into Dallas. If you drop 2 in a row, man, that can get out of hand really quick. You start to question yourself. You start to question confidence. So I think that this win is a little bit more important than the ones that we deem as automatic wins. I'd love to go into that Jets game with 10 wins already and say, you know what? I think we got a pretty good lock on the playoff spot. Let's go out there. But if the Jets pull off an upset, I don't care.
Yeah, no, that would be crazy.
That's where I want to be.
To be in a position where week 17 doesn't matter. And that's not crazy. That's not out of the realm of possibility. If we take care of our business and go through there, I say, if I had to pick, I agree. I think that this Sunday against the Broncos is as close to a must win as any that's left.
Not in the playoff probability mathematic world, right?
But in the likelihood, in the ones that what we can afford to drop, I think this is the least affordable game to lose on the schedule. You go into that, we're a touchdown underdog in Dallas for a reason. They are the best offense in the NFL right now, in the 6th ranked defense. They're great at home. They have an awesome offensive line. They're playing at peak potential right now. I think that we absolutely can hang with them. I think if we played 10 times, we'd win 3 of them, and maybe one of those 3 is on Thanksgiving. I think that's normal. Yeah. The one that I think is sneaky in our favor is the one coming off of that, where you're going to be talking about having 10 days rest against a Ravens team You're talking about playing them at home. You're talking about the Ravens are going to be coming in, and that we have them coming off of the 49ers, who is a really tough physical team. I think that that's maybe the game that out of the ones that we're not expected to win, that maybe we could sneak one. If we're going to sneak one, it would be that extra rest at home against a Ravens team coming off a really highly anticipated, talked about game with the 49ers, and probably, the media and the national reporters talking about a potential Super Bowl preview. Those kind of things coming off is where I think we could sneak one. And then if I had to pick the one that we would drop, it would be the Steelers.
Real quick, I hope the internet doesn't hear what you just say. You're going to get killed. You can find him at Greg Thompson on Twitter. Listen to what he just said. Rest of the internet, not Bills fans, and go roast him. Go have fun with that. Yeah, the internet doesn't want to hear that from you, man.
Yeah, and it's, I think that's the one that I think would be the sneakiest one. Obviously, on the road at Dallas, on the road to the Patriots, those are really tough ones to ask. And then the ones that the one that I do think we can win and is going to be close at Pittsburgh, I think is tougher than fans realize. And that if we're going to drop one of the ones that's expected, I think that's the most likely out of the Broncos, the Jets, and the Steelers. I think that Steelers game is the sneakier one out of those three that I think a lot of fans are chalking up as automatic wins.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you're saying there. So it's going to be an interesting few weeks. I do urge fans to it's hard to not go into the playoff predictors. It's hard not to look ahead. If you haven't learned anything at this point of being an NFL fan, though, it's such a week-to-week league. So many wonky things are going to happen each and every week. Who you think is definitely going to win next week is going to get blown out. There's just going to be weird things that happen. So let's enjoy this week. This one's going to be a tough one. This one's going to be a grind. And I really think it's as close to a must win. We've been saying that so many weeks here, but that's where this team is. That's where this Buffalo Bills team is. They have to win these games. And it's getting more and more as the schedule goes on. You heard Greg say it. They got to go 3-3. And this is one that you can win. It's at home. You got to win. If you get off a loss here, it could really slide into something that could get really put your backs up against the wall, and then you have to rattle off some wins at the end of the season that are must wins. I don't want that stress in my life.
Yeah.
I eat a lot of steak. I eat a lot of meat. I don't need that kind of thing bumping up my cholesterol.
If the people are looking to argue semantics and whether words matter, where can they find you?
Yeah, and pretty much every beat reporter in Buffalo's mentions. You can find me at Aaron Quinn 716. You guys mostly know where to find me by now, I hope. Give me a follow, give me a like. I'm really actually a nice guy. I just love my own opinions. I do.
You can't help it when you're right as often as you are. It gets difficult.
I keep trying to tell my wife that, but
yeah, good luck. You guys can find me out there as well. Normally jumping in 2 or 3 replies after Aaron's got everyone riled up, just kind of poking the bear. That's normally where you can find me at Greg Thompson, GregTompsett. Appreciate everybody. You guys were awesome in the chat tonight. A lot of fun things going on with the group here. If you want to become part of that, come check us out. Cover1.net. Become a premium subscriber, jump in the Slack channel. It really is a ton of fun. We have an awesome community. It's really built a lot of great friendships and people that, I talk to people in there more than I talk to most people in my family. It's a great group of people, and we're constantly in there kind of keeping everybody up to date on what's going on. You're able to jump in there, take advantage of being able to record live with us here on the pregame and postgame shows, being able to preview what's going on, kind of chime in and what's happening here. If you want to be a part of that, come and check in with us. We'd love to have you. Wherever you're listening to this, give us a like, give us a rating, give us a review, tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell somebody you see on the street that's wearing a Buffalo football team gear. Make sure to let them know that we're here for them and want to be able to bring them the news.
Absolutely. And just so you guys know, I love this group of guys so much that are in the chat, but I had to close it tonight because Keith had me almost busting out laughing a few times in some of the things in the chat, and I have to focus here, guys. So Keith, damn you, sir. Damn you very much. But no, it's a great group. Tons of fun. Definitely hit us up and get in that community because it's super enjoyable and way more enjoyable on game day than just the free, nasty world that Twitter can be.
Absolutely. So thank you guys very much. Enjoy what's going on here. You have been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.